Part 2 of my Savage Axis 2 280 AI hunting rifle series. I'll be doing a load development of both the 160 grain shock hammer bullet and in the future the 140 grain absolute hammer. I purchased 50 rounds of the Nosler 280 AI brass from Powder Valley. I selected 5 random pieces of brass and measured their overall length, and after 5 cases, it averaged 2.511 inches, which honestly surprised me since Sammy has the 280 AI at 2.525 overall length. Next, I measured the shoulder length using the Hornady Headspace comparator using the 375 bushing. The consistency after 5 cases was .001 variance, which is excellent in my opinion and well within Sammy specs. Next, I checked the case water weight. I somehow selected grams on my scale instead of grains, but I converted the numbers and came up with 71.45 H2O water average and 0.51 grain water weight variance. This is way below the 74 grains water weight that both Quick Load and Gordon reloading tools suggest. I'll be curious to see what once fired case will weigh. Hammer Bullets sells these awesome 15 bullet demo packs, which is a good means to see what will work for you. Plus, hammers are so easy to create a load development for, and you could do a lot with 15 bullets. I grabbed 5 random 140 grain absolute hammer bullets to get their weight and measurement. I did the same thing with a 160 grain shock hammer. Final total of the 140 grain absolute hammer weighted 139.26 grain average with a variance of 0.06 grains. The bullet length was 100% consistent at 1.374 inches. Bullet diameter was also 100% consistent at 0.284 inches. The 160 grain shock hammers weighed in at 158.79 grains average with a variance of 0.26 grains. The bullet length was 1.409 inches with a 0.001 variance. Bullet diameter was 100% consistent at 0.284 inches. According to Hammer Bullets website, the shock and power hammer bullets are for normal hunting ranges 400 yards or less. The shock hammers will retain 80% of their bullet weight and have a larger hollow point that allows super quick opening. Absolute hammers are a niche bullet similar to the Hammer Hunters, but designed for speed. The only part of the bullet that will come in contact with the rifling are the drive bands, which greatly reduces engraving, which in turn allows for increased velocities. This is not for the novice reloader. You have to experiment with different powders to create the increased velocity. I looked on Hammer Bullet shared load data, and there was no data for the 160 grain shock hammers. I then looked at Nosler's manual for their powder selection for the 160 grain bullet. I jumped onto Quick Load to source some powders. I have almost no slow burning powder. Ramshot Hunter looked like a good choice. I took a look at Ramshot's website, and they don't have any 280 AI load data. They did have the 280 Remington, so I used this as a baseline. I reversed engineered Nosler's data for the 280 Remington, and the 280 AI is about 5 grains increase over the 280 Remington, which now gives me a baseline to work from. Both the shock and power hammer have a pretty aggressive ogive, meaning you can't load them long. My experience with loading various shock and power hammers is you can't use SAAMI or reloading manual suggestion for seating depth. I grabbed one of the Nosler cases, started the process of seating. I like to crimp my bullets on top of the PDR band and use these as a reference point when seating the bullet. After many attempts of seating the bullet, putting it in the chamber, slowly running the bolt, feeling resistance, extracting the bullet, seating it to the next PDR band, I found the bullet jam right around 3.200 inches, which is slightly over the second PDR band. So I decided to seat the bullet to the first PDR band, which measures at 3.146 inches, giving me roughly a 0.054 jump. Here's a picture of the bullet on the outside so you can see how much of the bullet fills the case. Now that I had an actual seating depth, I plugged in the numbers into Quick Load. Just a side note, Gordon's reloading tool, otherwise known as GRT, has better powder profile information that is free to download. I settled on Ramshot Hunter for my powder. 100% case fill would be 56.5 grain with pressure just over SAAMI. I would start at 53.5 grains, use 1 grain increments. I would do a half charge at 56 grain, which is just under SAAMI max, and would do another half charge at 56.5 grains. Loading process was fairly routine for new brass. I chamfered and deburred all the cases. I ran 5 cases through the depriming die for consistency. I single staged the WLRM primers at 0.005 inches. I finger tapped the Ramshot Hunter powder to within 0.02 grains. I'm a big fan of Hornady custom grade dies that has a near 100% consistency. I marked the charge weight on the cases. It is probably not needed since the bullet is seated so far into the case, but I used a very light crimp on the bullets. Here are the first 5 bullets ready to rock out of my 280 AI mountain rifle. Stay tuned for my next adventure when I will run a pressure and velocity test.